share. And we'll do as we've been doing. Oops, I have to actually enable the screen share first. This one. So we'll do as we've been doing. I will read through. You guys stop me as I go, and then I'll make my marginal notes based on the text that we have. In this case, because George provided a lot, we'll also go through his. There's questions there that I think we can formulate responses to because they're good questions. And then we'll take it from there. All right, so as always, stop me whenever you want. Section 8, Economic Development, 8.1 Overview. Despite its prominence as a textile manufacturing hub during the industrial era, over time, Thompson has gradually become a bedroom community with the majority of residents commuting out of the area for employment and other economic activity. In the post-war era, separation of the home community and the work community became increasingly prevalent across the country, mirroring the rise of the automobile and the suburban sprawl that it helped to foster. The 2019 CERC Town Profile for Thompson reflects this, showing 1,578 employment units held within the town of Thompson during the survey period for a residential population of 9,602. By contrast, neighboring Putnam, with a comparably sized population, hosts nearly 4 times the employment units, 5,954, and does so with less than half the land area. The fields that show the highest concentration of employment in Thompson are in local government, including the public schools, manufacturing, and healthcare support services. These sectors do not generally present opportunities to keep local dollars circulating within the local economy. One result is that Thompson residents are compelled to spend their income in other communities, even for daily necessities such as groceries. For households that are not cost-burdened, having to travel by car for groceries, medical needs, or other necessities may be only an inconvenience. For the 22.79% of Thompson residents who are cost-burdened, the lack of a strong retail and services sector in Thompson adds to the challenges faced by such households. Elsewhere in this document, it has been suggested that the emergent paradigm shift toward remote work for the professional class can be capitalized to the benefit of Thompson. With well-compensated employment no longer tied to a choice between long commutes to or the high cost of living in metropolitan areas and their greater diversity of opportunities, relocation to Thompson becomes feasible. It has been demonstrated that the dollars per square foot costs of Thompson real estate are a great value for home buyers, and there is much for the town to boast of in terms of its outdoor recreation assets and its traditional New England aesthetic appeal. Given the comfort level of younger generations with remote work and their relative economic insecurity compared to older workers, a community like Thompson would seem well positioned to meet these needs. However, as has been previously shown, Thompson has relatively few of the smaller, more affordable housing units most suited to younger demographics. And despite the high cost, millennials and members of Gen Y persistently favor living in cities. The Nielsen report, which I link to, supports these assertions and also cites some efforts by municipalities to plan for future development, which is friendlier to this large demographic. It should also be noted that certain of the qualities most favorable to the younger age cohort are also favorable to aging seniors: walkability, proximity to services, smaller residential units with fewer maintenance needs, which is the demographic showing the greatest projected increase for Thompson over the next decade. In this section, we will examine the current challenges to economic development within Thompson, clarify the role of the Economic Development Commission in advancing thoughtful economic growth consistent with community priorities, and describe a number of economic development initiatives that have been proposed in recent years, along with plans to achieve those ends. Specific attention will be given to agricultural and food system development and outdoor recreation and tourism assets. All right, so let's start there. Comments, questions, additions, deletions, what do we got? And George, you can reiterate some of the points you made to me as well.
Tara, I just had one tiny thing. I mean, it sounded beautiful to me. You needed a comma up in the very first sentence where it says over time, comma, Thompson. Right? That's kind of a parenthetical phrase. Over time. That's the only thing I saw.
Brian's?
I mean,
anything to?
I'll jump in. I think it's very factual. I think it's a good lead-in to the following pages. I'm assuming.
Yeah.
I don't really have anything to add or take away. I feel like it's very informative about, gives a little bit of history. Then there's like a middle ground where you talk about employment and commuting, and then result of having, you know, walkability for future stuff, which is kind of our, I won't say our complete game plan, but a little bit of our, you know, game plan towards the new zoning regs and what we're trying to accomplish there. So I feel like it's very well written. I don't have anything to add or take away. I'd like to see George's comments, but yeah.
Yeah, and I can pull those up separately. Here comes Joe Perotti. What I'll do is I'll pull George's comments up at the end because they're very thorough, and it's easier to do that than to toggle back and forth. But I'll set you up,
Sure.
George, to add your thinking points here.
Yeah, if I could add a comment here. I keep looking at our intro sentence, the attention step, and I keep wondering, how could we make this a more inviting? And all the facts are, I mean, it's undisputed, the elements, right, the data you have there. However, I'm wondering, Thompson is not that much different than many other communities in New England, right? In the, we have as you point out, textile manufacturing, or, you know, post-agricultural industrial growth, which really didn't start until the mid-1800s. And, you know, as we mentioned in an earlier call, Samuel Slater was instrumental in that expansion. I'm wondering if we could sort of frame it in a context of, well, we don't have this problem. We've identified it as a, you know, our history, and we're making trying to develop a path for the future, building on that or something. But I keep struggling with, I started earlier today to rewrite it, but I said, well, maybe we just leave it there. But my initial thought was, I'm wondering how we can make this an open-ended, you know, sort of a warm, fuzzy start, you know, reflective, but optimistic about the future somehow. So I'm not saying it isn't, but I'm just thinking it's so factual. I'm wondering if we could have a little fluff, a little sales stuff in there somewhere. That's my initial thought.
A little too factual, huh?
For the Bryans who are new to this process, this is the ongoing dialogue between me and George, and I'm grateful for it because I am an android and just want to present the facts. And
Yeah,
George,
my question is, are we trying to keep it to a page? I guess I should start with that, because obviously you can add in as much as you like, you know, but I just don't know if there are limitations.
I like the length, and as I was reading this, and even the beginning, yeah, it may not be, it's not portraying optimism, but it's just fact. But
How about,
I had a visualizing, yeah, go ahead.
are you, well, George, were you questioning the word despite, the very first word? Because how about instead of saying despite, why don't you just say as a result?
Yeah, I struggled with it. You're on the right track. I was thinking about it. I think the intent, the spirit is there. I'm just wondering if we just sort of, you know, buff it up, get the silver polish out, and I don't know what the word, we can do it with words, and I may not be the best person for it, but like, I'm just like, let's make it with an you know, let's open it with a, hey, this is Thompson. This is, you know, we've come a long way. We had a great history. We're building on that. We're going to go to the future. But how do you do that, right? And also incorporate the facts, because the facts are important.
What I like is there's a lot of time who have been through this. A lot of towns in this area that were prominent at the turn of the last century. And this is relatable where, I don't know, it would give you a familiarity of the town and the area. I don't know, I was having a good visualization of it. As I read this, you captured everything. And I can picture when you talk about the millennials and Gen Y, smaller living spaces and all that, you know, I'm thinking, geez, our mill project, you know, fits right into that. And you captured it there.
I think all the bases are covered regarding, I mean, it's almost like a prelude to the housing section as well, but this is a little bit different than that. So we're setting the tone, and I think it sounds great the way it is.
I take your point, though, George, about the framing, and this is something that we've come back to pretty much every time I write something, right? Because I'm always the person to identify the obstacles first and then posit the solutions. It's in my nature. George keeps me on track and turns it into a more optimistic document every single time. And I think that I can engage with that in that opening paragraph on those lines. Look, these are common challenges regionally. You know, it leaves us with a grandeur of physical infrastructure in these mills, and we want to capitalize on that, but in these ways that are specifically forward-thinking to meet these needs. And I think that's probably the direction, and I think I can work with that. Anybody have anything else on this first section? Because there's only 2 sections. I tried to draft more this afternoon, but I only got into challenges. And then it's going to be, we're going to be writing this on the fly tonight, more or less. Anybody else here?
Yeah, my thought in reading this and to go to the comments that have already been made about this opening paragraph, I don't know if it would make sense, you know, now that we've finally gotten the past, I feel like all I want to do is talk about the regulations. It's worth mentioning those in there. You know, because as I was reading through this thing about, you know, we have to go next door for anything. I don't know if tying those in and their intention would be relevant or appropriate.
Yeah, and a fair point. I mean, for whatever it's worth, and I don't know how much of the rest of it you've had a chance to read yet, Joe, but I talk up that regulation rewrite in just about every section in one way or another, because for a number of reasons. First of all, because I think it was a tremendous accomplishment for you guys in the commission to get that done, you know, despite all the forces of status quo bias, but also because it is specifically relevant to almost every point that is being made about economic development, housing development,
right.
Walkability and trails. So I did make a marginal note here mentioning regulations, but let's move on to the next section, and you tell me if you think it needs more after we get through here. Because you guys don't have this page. I finished it like at 3:45, so I just figured it wasn't worth sending out. And it took me like 2 hours to write this, which is ridiculous. 8.2, challenges to economic development. In exploring appropriate strategies for economic development in conformity with community character and priorities, it is important to first undergo a clear-eyed assessment of any existing obstacles. While some critical elements have improved in recent years, the recommended overhaul of the zoning regulations being chief among them, many hurdles are yet to be crossed. In a Swot Analysis, Strengths, Weaknesses, Opportunities, Threats, compiled by NECOG as part of their year-long municipal branding workshop, the following were identified as weaknesses for Thompson. Appearance. The appearance of the town is diminished by the majority of the Route 12-131 corridor. The look of disrepair and neglect are not an image that enhances the town's ability to attract and maintain peoples or businesses. For whatever it's worth, this is more or less verbatim from the NECOG report, lightly edited for grammar and clarity. Competition. Head Start, Putnam, Webster, Sturbridge, Oxford, Killingly, Auburn, and Worcester have established business parks, incubators, marketing strategies, lands zoned on or near major transportation routes, and favorable zoning for business development. The River Mill, finding a use other than salvage parts is essential to the identity of the town. Zoning regulations, dated and difficult to read and understand. Economic development, the town has not had a robust or focused economic marketing strategy. Civic physical fragmentation, the town is fragmented. It is the sum of 10 zip codes with, that should be 10 villages, excuse me. 10 villages with multiple zip codes, fire departments and histories. Did you start to say something, Joanne?
Yeah, isn't there just 4 zip codes?
It is. That's a mistake. That's a mistake. It's 10 villages with multiple zip codes. That was a typo when I was transcribing.
Right. I understood. Go ahead.
Yeah. There's limited cohesiveness about the town that unites it, which is terrible language, but that's not mine. That's NECOG's. Housing. The town has a limited focus on housing rehab and improvement. Poverty. Parts of the town have significant poverty that is longstanding and multi-generational. The majority of this is focused on the Grosvenordale and North Grosvenordale villages in close proximity to Route 12. Grand list, overwhelmingly skewed toward residential property taxation dependence, limited options for accommodations. The town has multiple destinations for visitors, and several of them lend themselves to multi-day stays. I thought that was a bit of an exaggeration on NECOG's part at the time they wrote it, but that's okay. Unfortunately, there are few options for these visitors. Car dependence. The daily transit service is limited and does not provide an effective means for commuting or accessing services. All of these elements present some level of challenge to local economic development. In as far as several of them are addressed in other sections of the PoCD, in this section we will focus on those which apply specifically to a business-friendly development environment: competition from neighboring communities, development of a comprehensive economic development strategy, and building the grand list. It should be noted that several of these challenges identified in the 2017 to 2018 NECOG workshop have shown significant progress. Most notably, the Planning and Zoning Commission, as has been extensively referenced in this document, did complete the comprehensive overhaul of the zoning regulations in 2020. That update is significantly more supportive of business use at several levels of intensity, from micro businesses run out of the home to mixed-use development throughout areas served by public utilities. An additional category of home-based business was also devised, the neighborhood limited enterprise. That's our favorite, Joe. The NLE was conceived as an intermediary step between a kitchen table operation and a more mature business requiring a commercial location. All of these measures are intended to lower barriers to entrepreneurship for Thompson residents. That is as far as I got. So let's start with comments here, and then we'll pull up George's very thoughtful set of comments, and we'll use that for a markup document as well.
Kira, do you have to start off with appearance?
I did it in the order of the NECOG SWOT, just to follow it, but I don't have to use their language specifically. I don't have to quote it exactly. I did that for this exercise.
Well, the language is okay. I just, the first weakness is, our appearance. I mean, our appearance isn't that bad. That it
depends on the day you see it, I think, but yeah.
Top of the list, you know.
Ira, on the SWOT, maybe you could consider, and I don't recall looking at the NECOG SWOT, but oftentimes when we use it, we make it into a box and we put bullets: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, SWOT, maybe that's one approach. And maybe you could give 2 or 3 words with each, but maybe break it out into pieces, because this seems like an awful long W. Weakness.
Yeah.
And I keep thinking
I can recreate the NECOG table.
Yeah, I'm going to put my other 3 appendages in on this one. So, let's put some balance on it too. And that would make, appearance, yeah. But that's offset by the strengths, right? What are our strengths? We've got lots of real estate, 37 square miles. We've only got 9,300 people. That's a strength because, hey, now we can only go up, and we can go down the list, right? Moderate tax bracket, whatever, all the different things we have. Strengths, maybe 4 bullets, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And maybe under opportunities and strengths, we make those longer than the other ones, just to make it unbalanced.
Well, there's a couple of interesting things going on there as well. The NECOG SWOT is substantively different than the results of the gameplay that we did afterwards, partly because that was guided categories that introduced elements that might have been unfamiliar prior to the conversation, but got people thinking about those things. At some point, I want to incorporate that as well. I can certainly recreate the NECOG table. It is a table in the report document they gave back, but although it's scannable, The quality of the image is so poor because
You
of
can
the
create our
quality
own.
of.
I mean, how hard could it be? You just
Yeah,
create your own
I can recreate
and be
it.
selective. You don't have to put everything. Let's focus on the ones that we think. I keep wondering, I don't think I've met a NECOG yet, but maybe they're out there. I keep wondering if we're getting the short end of the register on this one. And all this stuff, you know. Oh yeah, then there's poor Thompson, you know, kind of thing. Who is NECOG?
NECOG is the Northeast Connecticut Council of Governments. Since Connecticut lacks counties,
Right.
they created the COGs, and there's, I think, 6 of them, 7 of them.
So maybe you think of
in
me
NECOG.
as I'm England and you're the EC, okay? They're the EC and I'm the UK. So maybe think of me like that. Because I keep thinking every time I think about NECOG, it's poor Thompson. And I'm like, well, who is that? And I'm not saying we don't want to be part of it, but, you know, we've got to look out for ourselves at the end of the day. At least that's my opinion.
Yeah, well, I mean, we are a part of it. I mean, it is.
I'm not
It
saying we
is the
abandon
closest
it.
thing we have to regional organization.
Absolutely, but we can define our own vision, our own personality, our own, you know, goals, and I mean that kind of stuff. Rather than NECOG says, well, guess what?
Well, see,
I'm sure it's like all other organizations. They have their own agendas and stuff, and I bet there's a pecking order in NECOG. Who's first on the list?
Joe, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, so this, right, 8.2 section is challenges to, or challenges for, what, challenges to economic development, right? Which is why I think, you know, as George points out, it's very heavy on the weaknesses of the, it does, making it factors affecting economic development or something like that, changing the section title in such a way that it makes sense to include all of the elements of the SWOT.
Yeah.
Good call, Joe Perotti.
Yeah, because that was my question. Are there other sections that talk about the other, you know, acronym words there? Is there a section, you know, strengths of economic development, or is it all right in this 8.2 section that we have to outline it all the way?
We can change both how I outlined this and how I end up drafting it as we like. I do this stuff just so we have a framework to start from. If people find it unsatisfactory, that's exactly what these discussion groups are for. So I can tell you how I have the table of contents currently laid out, and I already know this is going to change. Because when I wrote this outline, it was the first thing I did before we started. And as we're starting this work, some of these sections are just too long. So the way I have it outlined currently, just for reference, 8.1 overview, 8.2 challenges to economic growth, 8.3 overview of the zoning regulations overhaul. I actually don't think we need that in here specifically on its own, although maybe it's such a significant piece that we want to keep it. But I think that gets referenced so often throughout that possibly it doesn't need a standalone section, although it is certainly an important element of how these things are going to move forward. 8.4, Economic Development Commission roles, responsibilities, and advocacy, which I would like to keep, and that's what I'd like you guys to help work through, specifically Brian's and Joanne. 8.5, Inventory of Ongoing Economic Development Initiatives, which I would also like to keep because it benchmarks what we're doing. 8.6, Food Security and Economic Development. 8.7, Outdoor Recreation Assets and Economic Development. That I think can be very short because we give a lot of room to trails. They get their a whole subsection of their own, and again, we reference it fairly continually. Historic and cultural assets and economic development. Again, I think this is one we can possibly scrub as a standalone because we reference the history as a priority throughout, and I'm not entirely sure that specific measures are capitalizing on it. And 8.9, Economic Development and a Green and Growing Community. Those last sections we have changed almost entirely to action steps.
Okay.
But again, any suggestions, additions, deletions, lay it on me, and then in a second I'll pull up George's thing.
So I'm sorry, maybe I missed it, Tira, but are you going to take from the game that we played whatever months ago now and just list all the strengths here as well? I obviously we see the weaknesses, but what is the ultimate game plan for the other words in the SWOT?
Right. Well, so the SWOT analysis technically is the thing that NECOG did. What we did, I refer to often as a kind of a SWOT, but it wasn't really. It was solely an identification of the things that people, or the people in Thompson who participated that day, which was 60, 70 people, who are some of our most engaged residents, found to be important and worthy of prioritization. So it is slightly different from a SWOT, but it serves a similar kind of function, and it's a focus exercise.
We call it a focus group. I called that a focus group because I was there. I mean, really, it's, you know, you
I think all you guys were there.
Yeah, we throw out the questions, you build it up, but this way you have something to work with, right? Especially like, you know, like think of the town as a product. Okay, what are our issues? I don't know. What are they? Well, let's ask a bunch of people, and that's what we did. We had this giant focus group. We had teams, you know, all those, you know, cues and prioritizations. But if you're going to distill this down to a SWOT, you're going to get four quadrants and put 5 bullets in each, and take the top 5 in my recommendation, because no one's going to first remember more than 4 or 5, and if it's long, they won't even read it at all. If it's too long, they just won't read it.
I'm just wondering, and I understand you took all this from NECOG, or at least a portion of it, and I know you're working hard on it. I just feel like, and I'm not disagreeing with any of the bullet points there, right? I mean, I think they could be modified in some way, but there's definitely some good points there. I feel like we should use the data that you work so hard to gather and put it into this document in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily need to be in a SWOT format, you know, whatever the format was during the game, which I'm assuming is something similar to this.
Yeah, I've been not exactly struggling, that's too strong a word, but I have definitely been trying to find a way to incorporate that stuff, because for me, just as a person coming into my position, I've used that focus exercise as a kind of guidance document all along. It's why I started with certain of the projects that I started, the grassroots ones, the NIPS collection, the stuff that you can do on the ground that speaks to things that people have already said that they value. And I haven't found that in yet. So maybe it is in this section, because I do think a lot of that stuff does tie into economic development. So I'm making my marginal note here to incorporate game results. A couple of question marks. How? And some of those results were odd.
I could see that.
Right, they went from the super specific and granular, like litter management, which was, the top 3 were litter management, local identity, and civic branding. So you have one thing that's super granular, and 2 things that are super open-ended. And then if you go further down into some of the results, you get some other things that had a lot of consensus that I still sort of look at when I'm, you know, trying to focus myself on projects, like historic identity or historic landmarks. That was, you know, right up there in that next category, and certain other things which don't come to mind as easily, but I've got all the results tabulated. And they do deserve mention because they are identified priorities, but where and how is the question for me. So as these things occur.
Well, the other thing that I continue to read this, you know, this, like, for example, competition head start. Okay, fine. That's nice, but I don't know if there's any action item for us to take on that. Right? I don't know why I need to read that sentence, right? Okay, yeah, everyone's got a head start on Thompson. Okay, next. You know, is that truly a weakness? I don't know. I don't know how to correct that weakness other than what we just did with the zoning regs, and hopefully for the next 5 years it takes its course. But I don't know. I feel like, and I don't want to insult anybody who's writing this stuff. It's just words on paper with really, there's nothing there, right?
You're incapable of insulting me, Brian.
Yeah, thank you. You know, I just don't know what I'm getting out of, you know, competition, Head Start, or like the word poverty. Okay, yeah, there's parts of Thompson that are, you know, in the poverty area. Okay, fine.
But every town,
you know?
too.
Yeah, I don't know what I'm getting out of that sentence. You know, I'd rather have another sentence that has something maybe with strengths instead in a different paragraph somewhere, right? I don't need to talk about poverty.
So in terms of these bullet points, you know, and I just listed them exactly as NECOG gave them to us. I'm not suggesting we have to keep them all. Are we saying that the only things we want to bother to call attention to are things that we can have an effect on through planning and action?
I believe, like the river mill, finding a use for the river mill other than salvage parts makes sense to me. There is an action that can be taken there. You know, that's the way I'm reading this document.
And what about the very first one, where we don't like starting with appearance? We could say something like, we have an opportunity to improve the appearance of the town along Route 12 and Route 131. Period.
Yeah.
Well, there are many
and that kind of goes to
everywhere to improve it too, right?
Yeah, everything that is an obstacle is actually an opportunity, right? And to go to Joe's point about framing it as factors instead of challenges, it gives me, as I write the final form, more flexibility in how that is phrased.
Yeah.
So that is a good point. So civic physical fragmentation, there's some things here we deal with in other sections as well. Civic and physical fragmentation, that's a part of the discussion under local identity, and we posited some, and also under some governance stuff with civic engagement. We posited some solutions to those things already. So possibly we don't need to revisit that.
I have a dumb question. Someone needs to educate me here. What is the definition of grand list? What does that mean? Overly skewed towards residential property taxation dependence. What is the grand list?
Great question.
George, you can probably explain that better than I can. It's essentially taxable real property including residential stuff, but the assets that businesses have that are taxable at a different rate.
I mean, if I had to guess, that's what I would have said. But okay, all right, that makes sense. Thank you.
Sort of a colloquial term.
And that might not be the that might not be the exactly technical way to explain what grand list is. It's a term that gets used a ton in Connecticut. I've never heard people reference it that way in Massachusetts ever.
I mean, that's what it's called in the town hall. I mean, everybody looks at.
Oh, really?
Okay.
Well, there you go.
If you took a course in real estate, they talk about the grand list, right? And they refer to it as a reference, although everyone could probably call it something different, like we call, cabinets and milkshakes and colas and pop and all that, right? Same thing happens. Sure. But if we took courses in real estate, we'd look at it and say, all right, traditionally in America, because we have public school systems, the grand list or the tax base is supports the school. And to determine your budget for your town, you need to know what your available taxable assets are. That's where the bulk of the revenue comes from. After that, you have to start levying individual activity and social and sales taxes and all that, local taxes. In places like, New York, you have triple tax, right? City, state, and federal. But so anyway, it's a term of art, I think is the best way of.
All right, as long as it's a common name, and I'm sure they're using it. But thank you for the description, George.
It's a weird name, though. Really, what's a grand list?
It gets a lot more use in Connecticut than any other local region, I find.
Brian, you can walk into the town hall, into the assessor's, not the assessor's office, I'm sorry, the town clerk's office, and walk into the vault, and there before you will be a huge copy of the grand list, which is in gold print. Right on the cover, it says grand list.
All right, Joanne, you and I can do that one day. We'll hold hands and we'll go down, look at the grand list and check it out one day.
It's a fun read, I'll tell you.
So I'm going to suggest from this particular list of items, if we're still using this list, scrubbing the civic and physical fragmentation. I feel that is addressed elsewhere and is not specific to economic development. I do think car dependence is. I think the grand list is. I think accommodations is something we've talked about. Housing is borderline. It does get its own section. I would leave the zoning regulations in there because it's something we can point at. So it was called out and we fixed it. An appearance, maybe that isn't even worth including, right? Because is that an economic development issue? Tangentially, probably yes, but possibly not as relevant in terms of discussing solutions in a section about economic development if we're focusing on building the business environment, building wealth for citizens.
It could be a dual element too. That could be a strength and a weakness, because
Absolutely.
You could say appearance. Well, how did they solve it in my hometown in Wickford, Rhode Island? They passed historical zoning, and everyone had to meet the historical character. Otherwise, the town did it and sent you the bill. So that's one way of doing it, but that's an opportunity. If you look at another thing like that's an opportunity. The weakness would be, if you don't do anything. But that goes both ways. And SWOT, those aren't mutually exclusive. For example, the river mill, that's a strength and a weakness, right? The strength is that you have potential for development. You have an asset that's undervalued, creates the opportunity for new capital to come in to revitalize that, whatever, 700,000 or 800,000 square foot building, slapping 50 or 60 or $70 million into it. That would increase the grand list probably by 30% or so, right? So on both sides, it's an asset and it's a liability. The question is, how do we want to play it?
Yeah, I would leave appearance there just because I think it's a broad, positive
Just
and
de-emphasize
negative.
it.
Yeah, I don't like when they're using the words look of disrepair and neglect. I mean, really? So like all of Thompson is disrepair and neglect? I mean, really? It's just not right.
That was pretty strong language.
Yeah, I'll tell you right now, there's zero chance I'm leaving any of John Filchak's language in here.
Yeah, okay, good.
So,
I mean, it's just going to make people feel like they're not doing.
That's just the way that is.
Good job.
Beauty's in the eye of the beholder on this one, right? So some people would say it's either half full or half empty. So let's go with the half full version.
It looks like Amy just came in, guys. I'm going to swap out the one that I drafted and go to, oops, try this again. And I'm going to go to the comments that George sent me today, again, which are very thoughtful. Some of them are quite challenging, especially to some of the things that we've been proposing, right? So what I like about that is that it puts me in the position of having to defend why we've made choices. So I'm going to read George's comments just as I would have read ours, so I can scroll down as we need to. And what he did further, and I'll go up, is he highlighted these elements that stood out to him in my closing paragraph from the overview. All right. Challenges to economic development. Do we have a clearly articulated plan identifying our SWOT? Who is the largest employer? In a population of over 9,000, does an employer of 100 really rise to the station of large employer? Total government employment is listed as 301. Is the town actually the largest employer? In 2010, education was the largest employer. Is that still the case? If so, then what educational institution is there other than Marianapolis? Is education even a viable sector for the future given the real and present danger posed by COVID? Looking at the top 5 grand list employers in 2014 suggests that the largest employer of individuals is the town of Thompson. How many workers employed by schools, town government, public works? Superior Bakery, Numatul, and Norampak are listed as major employers. Just as a sidebar, Norampak, that facility is now nutmeg container Unicore. So that particular data is already obsolete. And I don't know how many employees they've got over there, but I've got a fairly good relationship with Charlie Pius, so I can probably find out. What do we know about these three major employers? What percentage of total town employment? What percentage of workers actually live in Thompson? And this is of interest to me. I am curious how many people are commuting in from Superior Bakery to Superior Bakery, New Matul, which has a very interesting website, and Nutmeg Container. Drill down on the who, what, why, and how of the current employers. Once we have that data, then we can chart a course for the future. Let's find out what businesses are seeking new locations and would benefit from being located in Thompson. Major transportation route, Worcester-Providence Rail, 45 miles to Providence, 30 miles to Worcester, 40 miles to Hartford. Essentially, if we don't know which businesses we want to attract and why we want those businesses, then we will not use our resources effectively. I'm going to read through the whole thing, guys, and then we'll go back section by section. Role of Economic Development Commission. Let's be frank, shouldn't the EDC be on the road advertising the virtues of having employers relocating to Thompson? Shouldn't they be the marketing department of the town? Do we even have a Chamber of Commerce that is involved with attracting businesses to Thompson, or is it regionalized by county and we are left to fight for ourselves? The first and most important challenge for the EDC is to see the mill development project come to life. As noted in our recent discussion, the Putnam project appears to be a stellar success. And again, we aren't Putnam and need to assess if that is the direction we need to go. If you ask me, the role of the EDC is to travel the nation to bring business to Thompson. That could be in the form of state, regional, and national marketing efforts. Let's not forget the four fundamentals of marketing: PPPP, product, price, place, promotion. How do we stack up? I wasn't sure what you meant by these bullets, George. So I'll let you cover those.
Rhetorical questions, yeah, okay, keep going.
Yeah. Community priorities. Is there a list? If so, please point me to it. I'm not being obtuse. However, litter management is, in my view, a symptom of something missing in a community, not to diminish its importance. However, I would not list it as a priority. I would say develop all available commercial property, improving the grand list base by 10% each year for the next decade. Assist and secure the relocation of 5 new employers with employment greater than 50 jobs in the town of Thompson each year for the next 10 years. Effectively market the image of Thompson as a business-friendly place to locate your company for the reasons we detail and have individuals responsible for the deliverables. A concern is that what comes first, the business or the quality of life? Looking at EDC materials from the past, we see discussions of developing, looks like somebody's got a chat here. Yeah, Amy sent you a message in the chat if you can see that, George.
I did, I got it. Thank you. If I could go back and correct my grammatical errors, I thought this was a one-on-one to Tara, so I wasn't, my secretary was on break that day. Keep going.
Don't worry about it, George. These are all good and thoughtful points that we all need to consider. That's exactly what these discussion groups are for.
Yeah, it's a rough draft, is what it
is.
Yeah.
So no worries. This is not final public information. Looking at EDC materials from the past, we see discussions of developing a system of principal thoroughfares, parkways, bridges, streets, sidewalks, multi-purpose trails, and other public ways as appropriate. All desire and worthwhile endeavors. However, is it a first priority when we don't have the tax base to fund such initiatives? Wouldn't 10 new employers achieve that goal faster? Would you list on one page the current economic development initiatives? I hope they total only 5. No more, and that every town meeting, commission, and news release starts off with a reminder for all participants what those initiatives are. Well, you're singing my song there, George. All too often, a great deal of time and effort is spent developing detailed initiatives, plans, and goals, only to have them filed and revisited every several years. Let us avoid groupthink and myopia. We are citizens of Thompson. We have a lot to offer and a proud history that contributed to the success of this country. Let us not diminish our contributions. Let us be sure to reinforce our successes. They, the ever-present they, do not know our story. We do, so let's be sure everyone in Thompson does as well. I suggest we conduct a survey monkey analysis and determine if the population, I don't know what this means, George.
It means, can the population of Thompson list those objectives? I question whether they could.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Economic development goals, I was free-forming.
I got you. All right.
If they don't know, then that's the point.
Well, right. Agricultural and food system development. What can the town of Thompson do that the USDA isn't already doing? Are we really an agricultural town? That can be said for Woodstock and a number of other towns in eastern Connecticut. However, when was the last new agricultural farm formed? Not llamas. If we are an agricultural town, then why are no farms listed in the top employers? Also, why are no farms listed in the top 10 taxpayers for the grand list? There is an answer to that question, George, which I believe is that farms are taxed differently. In fact, I think they're eligible for quite a few easements and.
Yeah, but that means they pay less taxes, not more. Okay.
That is correct.
It's the wrong direction. We need the money. We need the revenue.
Farms in general pay less in taxes. That is
right.
True.
I get it.
Let's be honest, the only reason Thompson is due to Samuel Slater and other mill owners who developed mills along the French and Quinebaug rivers 150 years ago. That is why we have a mix of people with diverse ethnic origins today, not because of agriculture. So we might want to see further development in agriculture. However, that won't pay the bills, educate our children, build a community for the 21st century. The pre-industrial agricultural subsistence economy that dominated many small towns in the Northeast is certainly a wonderful world to think about. However, we're dealing with the 21st century issues today and into the future. Outdoor recreation, we all like this. However, please quantify the direct economic impact on the town of Thompson, Airline Trail, Nature Conservancy, lands hiking. Is this really an engine for economic development? We are not Vermont with mountains. We aren't Narragansett with a bay, Cape Cod, or an island with beaches and seagulls. There are actually answers to these questions as well, but we'll get to those later. We are really two towns or sectors, a former mill town that is struggling through gentrification and other challenges, and the remaining open space, a legacy of landed operations tied in a tangential way to agriculture. If not in one of the two categories, we are so-called gentlemen farmers and telecommuters with a growing number of retirees. It may be offensive to some, however, please prove that outdoor recreation actually generates a material amount of revenue to Thompson. Tourism assets, tri-state marker, airline trail, train crash site from 100 years ago. You know my notes above regarding agriculture. How much revenue did Thompson receive for these attractions? Even if we did attract tourists, where would they spend money? Coffee shop, no hotels, some B&B. How many keys or rooms does Thompson have available to host an event? Seems as if everyone will stay somewhere else. So we get to the good stuff at the end, which we will also do now. So let's go up to the top and take this stuff point by point. George and I may have some extremely friendly debate on this, but that's what's going to make this good content. So I will let you, I'll let you start, George.
Thank you. So this is I took a look at your draft, which is very thorough and very accurate, I'm sure, and tracks with what I think in the whatever 20 years I've been in this town. And I looked at the highlights, right, in your thesis statement, which is, and therefore we have all these challenges, and we highlighted them. So we start out with challenges to economic development, and I'm sitting here as a citizen who's trying to be fairly in tune. I know we have initiatives going on, but I keep wondering if I could list them, and I probably can't, not thoroughly, not comprehensively. So I looked at all those elements. I think a lot of this comes down to, if we narrow our focus on the really important things, and this happens not just in Thompson, but for every endeavor, whether it's a business, whether it's a nation, whether it's a family, there are numerous things that we all want, and they all are important. I'm not saying they aren't important. The NIP thing is important. I find them next to my mailbox all the time, but I keep wondering if I had to list the priorities for the town, is that the top one? I see it as low-hanging fruit, and I think it's a starter. It sort of primes the pump. It engages the population. It fosters civic involvement. So those are really important things. However, from a macro standpoint, and I'm thinking more strategically, right? Where is the vision? Where should we focus our energy? What buttons should we push every day to make this move forward? I see that as the role of commissions, of the leaders, everyone in the town, the management of the town, to say, here, we've got the day-to-day things to think about, but we have our head up and we're looking to the future, and we want to prepare for that future. If we don't prepare for it, we won't be ready when the opportunity comes. If like many businesses today are learning, they weren't prepared for a shutdown of an indeterminate period of time due to COVID, right? They're struggling. Some are going to go out of business. 20% of businesses are going to fail. I mean, and I can go on and on about that, but the thing is, it's all about being prepared, and it's not in front of you. So we look at the things we need, a lot of the important elements. So these are some of the challenges that I touched down, but we need to all know and be able to articulate without a awful lot of words, the who, the what, the where, and the how, right? Or something equivalent. If you take it back even another step, think of an elevator speech. You have 30 seconds to get somebody's attention and get their interest so they can come and buy from you, you can provide them services or something. What is it we're going to say about Thompson? We can't give them here's a 50-page document. They aren't going to do that. They aren't going to read it. They're going to read that to support it. We need a vision to help nail it down. And I see those types of things. At least that's the first section there. And you already read it out and everyone has comments there, but I'd be interested in everyone's feedback. And I see we have got a few folks here.
I'll provide a little bit of feedback to that. I'll be honest, my head is spinning a little bit because there's a lot of thought processes that I'm going through right now. But and I have no problem, like I said earlier, with the whole SWOT outline as long as we're utilizing it properly. But when I think about the development of the town, you mentioned low-hanging fruit, George. I think that there's really basically two categories. The low-hanging fruit that builds momentum in the town, right? Doing nips, fixing sidewalks, repairing light bulbs, making an appearance of attraction. Perception is reality once you walk or drive into town, right? So you want to deal with those low-hanging fruit items. And then there's the long-term plan category, which talks about those bigger initiatives over a period of, let's just say, for talking purposes, 2 to 10 years. I don't, I was going to say 2 to 5, but some things take longer than that. But those are the two categories that I'm looking at, because these build momentum. If we don't see results, things would just fall apart. So we need to do those low-hanging fruit items in order to get the goals of the long-term things. And I think that needs to be expressed somewhere in this document.
Agree.
And I think that is the plan. So I'm gonna give my refutation to George in our friendly debate, and then because there is a differing perspective to the way one approaches these things, and I subscribe to a philosophy of incrementalism because I believe that it is more sustainable over time and allows you to take more smaller risks and discover what works and build on those in a more organic fashion. And that was part of what was driving the game exercise and a lot of the other pieces. All of the master projects that we've talked about, which I would agree with George, although a great number of people do know about them who have been working on them, I would agree that larger community awareness is low. That is a challenge faced by pretty much every place, right? Public engagement is low in suburban communities, pretty much across the board, because it's easy to, in most communities I've ever lived, right? I went to work, I drove home, I didn't know my neighbors, I didn't care about them, I had nothing invested in the community as long as I had a job somewhere, which was almost never in the community. Right? Those models are largely unsustainable. When we go in the earlier parts of these documents and we show how this desire for a certain kind of character is unsustainable based on the density that we have, the taxation level, the only way we can pay for what we have is either to tax people out the nose or to encourage more density, that is factual. But also factual are that people value certain things about the physical characteristics of their community, the history of their community. So the conventional way to approach this has been to attract from the outside into a community things like businesses. But as George and I were talking before the meeting got over, a company that easily locates to a place can also easily locate away from a place. the investment in the community is low, and you're almost always dragging them in with things like incentives, right? We're going to break down your taxes. We're going to give you something to come here. Whereas if you start from a ground up perspective with things that are more on the incubator level, and that can start with little tiny things like those pop-up shops, right? That is micro business. Micro businesses, when you have, let's say you have 300 micro businesses in the town of Thompson. If 20 of them fail, 280 of them have not failed, right? It's a more sustainable fabric over time. Whereas all you have to do is look at that mill down the road and see what happens when you put all your eggs in 1 or 2 or 3 large employers. All it takes is a sector of the economy to fail, and you have generational problems to overcome. So the things that we have started to propose have started on an incremental level. However, they aren't just incremental. That incubator project that I've proposed is definitely forward thinking, right? It's looking, what is the education level that we've got? What is the kind of workforce that exists? What kinds of micro businesses or small businesses can be started by people here now with the skill sets that they have, or with skill sets that are easily acquirable, and that recognizes the kinds of community identity that exists. So George is absolutely right. We haven't been primarily a farming community for decades and decades. But the fact that there are fewer farming communities is actually a problem nationwide. Our food systems are top-down, dependent on very fragile supply chains. COVID exposed that, right? You can't get stuff all of a sudden. There's shortages. You have to depend on big box stores. You know, food security is a real issue going forward for reasons that are economic, for reasons that have to do with climate, for reasons that have to do with sustainability. And we are in a position where we have a physical infrastructure, meaning an amount of land that enables people to farm in unconventional ways, but still farm. I'm not saying farming is our entire future. I'm saying that that is an entry point, right? And having an incubator that focuses on food systems, agriculture, that is an entry point that acknowledges the kind of population that we have, right? But not an end point at all. And the second one, to go to the outdoor recreation bit, there are reports all over the place, and I can probably send you dozens that show outdoor recreation is an economic driver. What is the flip side of that? You have to drive them to something. George is absolutely correct that the things that we currently have to do outdoors in Thompson do not themselves generate any dollars. I made that exact point in the first NECOG meeting I ever attended during the branding study. Yes, they're great, but what do they get us? So the flip side of that is, if we're going to develop the tourism asset, which I'm working very hard to do through my relationship with the Eastern Region Tourism District, the other piece of that is encouraging that kind of small business. Again, small, sustainable. If you have 24 of them, 5 of them can go out of business a year. If they're replaced by another 5 or 6, your overall balance is healthier in the long run. So none of it precludes any other piece. It's just saying that you start with small risks that you can manage until you can take bigger risks later.
Tara, on a couple of points that came to mind when you were speaking. One is that we need to always segregate the difference between strategic goals and tactical goals, okay? So strategic are the big picture items, tactical is the implementation. And I see NIPS as more of a tactical item here. So I'm not saying they don't belong, but I don't see them as a leading element. And also, as I point out in my little missive here, it's sort of is that a symptom of something else? So I'm concerned about that. But you know, if we get the strategic elements right, and we get those elements going, then sort of the others follow, and they're sort of self-eliminating. That's one thing. And secondly, you know, agricultural economies are great. I was involved with a lot of large national and global agricultural entities, and in the 21st century, agriculture, for the most part, a economy of scale. It's a law of, it's a huge, it's the small, small farms and stuff, not to say they don't exist. And, Vern and Julie up there with their South American camels are, really great. I like them a lot. And they make great stuff. I buy my socks there all the time because they're hyperallergenic and everything. But, it's sort of, I don't know that that's going to turn the dial, is my point. It's just really hard to make it work. And places that do have large agricultural areas, go to the Midwest and parts of the Ohio River Valley and stuff. Yeah, but that's a whole magnitude of scale, and it's all large scale. And the ones that succeed are those that buy up everyone else, and it's corporate America, ADM and others, grocer to the world. Those are the people that are really pulling agriculture and making it work. Can we have some successes? Sure, but if we're going to spend our energy on something, let's focus on the big picture items that we can list. If we could all list 5 things that are really important, we all know what they are, and not only us but everyone in the town. And not only do you have 8 people that are marketing, but you have another 8,000 or 9,000 that are out there trying to spread the word. Thank you.
Yeah, and again, I don't disagree with anything that you just said, except in one final point, and I'm going to go back to agro-business on scale. Agro-business at large scale, although it is the paradigm, is ultimately not a good system for small localities. And there are small startup agricultural entrepreneurs all over the country who do make it work, in Detroit, in Worcester, in New Haven, right? People are farming in cities. What is true is that you're not going to see a return to what you and I picture in our heads when we say farm, the silos, the endless fields of grain. But monocropping is an environmental disaster anyway, right?
Well, let's just do marijuana or something. If you want to do that kind of stuff, you got some margin there, but then you get value. The thing is, if you're growing whatever food stuffs, you're not going to can't grow enough celery to make it work. If you want to grow grass, maybe, marijuana or something, whatever it is they grow, you'll be all set. But that's almost a different, segment. Maybe that's the micro agribusiness that works. You can have an acre's worth that's worth millions, and then we can tax it. And then even the marginal tax will generate a lot. But I don't know if that's the direction. That's a whole different discussion, really. It has a whole different number of ramifications. We aren't there yet.
Well, look at things like breweries, George.
Yeah.
10 years ago, who would have thought that microbreweries would be a recession-proof, pandemic-proof industry? All small people, right? 1, 2, 3 guys. Some of them get bigger, like Wachusett up in Central Mass. They went from 4 guys in a warehouse to, butting right up against Sam Adams in terms of their reach. Sure. Those are sustainable businesses that build individual wealth, right? Wealth for 2, 3, 4, 5 individuals. When you have 2, 3, 4, 5 individuals building their own wealth in the community, and you have that replicated across your community, that has a lifting effect for all. That is not to preclude. I never preclude the more conventional option. But I would argue that there is some evidence that the more conventional route of attracting a corporation, capital C corporation, is not a great fit for Thompson at this time because of the workforce that we have, right? I mean, look at the Amazon example. They're relocating their headquarters to places where they have a highly educated, nimble workforce. They want to be able to walk to work. They want transit. They want quality of life for their residents. So if you build the quality of life, and that includes building small businesses that begin and are employing people within the community, you have a more attractive asset overall. So when I say I'm an incrementalist, I'm saying exactly that. You start small with what you have and you expand your risk pool. And at some point, that risk pool really isn't risky anymore. It just becomes attractive. And there is a lot of work to do here. But everything that the EDC has done since I've been involved, and that's about 1.5 years since before I was employed, and I can't speak to, you know, what went before, has been looking at those things, starting small, eventually scaling up.
Good.
Lay it on me, guys. What do we got? Who wants to address any of these individual points so that we can create a document out of this?
Well, are we going to be specific about? Listen, I don't mind listing the largest employer there, but is that something that we really truly want to list in these in this document you're creating, Tira? I'm trying to wrap my head around what we're trying to do with those 2 bullet points. Like, do we want to list Superior Bakery and New Matul? Are we trying to give a percentage of employees that work in Thompson and Superior Bakery? That's just a factual number, or I'm just trying to wrap my head around why we want to do that.
Yeah, it's a valid point, Brian. I certainly included some of that information in the overview stuff, right? Because all the overviews is just that snapshot of what we have.
Is it just like a pride thing, George? Is that why you listed that? It's like, I'm proud to say that Superior Bakery, whatever, has 50%.
No, I'm glad you raised the question, Brian. The reason I put that there is, like I said, this is rhetorical. Why would we list those things? Those are the question marks.
Yeah.
How many, do we know who these people are?
Yeah,
are those
okay.
who we aspire to become? Who is
Yeah.
NORPAC? What do they do? You know, that kind of thing. My whole point was, I didn't quite come out and say, you know, who knows where this thing will end up.
Yeah.
My point is that what we want in Superior Bakery? Well, that's a 100-year-old business that was founded by the Fochers, who sold it out. You know, they don't operate it anymore. It's owned by somebody else, right? They moved their operations to Massachusetts or something. This is left. I mean, when was the last time you bought a loaf of when was the last time you bought a loaf of Superior Bakery bread? I mean, so is this what we want? But the fundamental issue on this, and the reason I emphasize it, is, do we know who our businesses are? We're going to say we want businesses. Who are they? That goes back to the who, the what, what is it we want to build? And before you can, if you don't know where you're going, right, then it doesn't make any difference how you get there.
Sure. I look at like your last bullet. Let's find out what business are seeking new locations and would benefit for being located in the town of Thompson.
Yeah.
So I look at that sentence and I say to myself, well, into what you guys are talking about a little while ago, is we're trying to provide opportunity. That opportunity is now justified in our new zoning regulations. I hope that businesses come to town and present us information on how they're reading the zoning regulations, and whether that's agriculture or some other business, that's fine by me. I just want a solid marketing plan that's above my head, which is the next item that we need to tackle on how we go taking our hard work on the zoning regs and make that available to various businesses and other people to get them to come through the door in town and present to us. It's the way I look at it.
Or can I add to your comment and follow on? Those are all important points, but here's the question. How many companies are looking to relocate to Eastern Connecticut today?
I have no idea, George.
Right.
No idea.
Number one. Number two, what are the fundamentals they're looking for? 3, what type of demographic do they want as workers? So what I'm thinking is, when, for example, it's deer hunting season opened on the 15th, and when I pick a spot to go hunting, I do the analysis by the DEP, and they give you the population density and stuff. So I analyze all that data, and I select my hunting locations based on the highest density of deer and the lowest number of hunters, and also where I have a competitive advantage over all the other hunters. Maybe I use a bow, maybe I have special passes and stuff, and I zero in on that. So that's how you hunt deer, and maybe you're successful, maybe you're not. Then it's up to you to do the target and put the arrow in the target. So think of that as a tactical issue. I have to put my arrow where it belongs. Strategically, I've identified, quantified, and zeroed in. I've marketed to my target, which is the deer area to hunt. So if we take this EDC and we transfer it into the world of getting businesses to come here, maybe we go after them, because if we sit here and wait for them, I'm guessing, and I'm not saying we have, but if we sit here and wait for them to come, maybe they'll come, maybe they won't. But if we could encourage them to be here, if we could find out who wants to come here and what their needs are, then maybe we can get a funnel, a pipeline of companies coming to Thompson, right? Rather than waiting for them to discover us. Because we're a lot better probably than a bunch of other communities. And we need to know why we're better, right? It's competition. We're competing with all the other towns in Connecticut that are, have similar challenges. Maybe they don't have as great opportunity, because I think we have a lot better opportunities. So that's my point, right? So rather than let them come, how about us go after them and let's get them? Let's go after them, let's target them and go after them.
I can't agree more with everything you just said, George. And I believe in that question that you wrote there, shouldn't we be marketing the department of the town? And the answer is absolutely yes. But what is the roadmap that's going to allow us to do that, right? So we need a guide. We need an outline. There's got to be something there to help us be able to.
I'll quote Kennedy, right? Let's not ask them. Let's tell them. You're looking at it. You're all on this call right now. Yeah. Let's do it. Let's tell them how we're going to do it. That's all. And I'm not saying it's going to be easy. I'm not saying we'll always be right. We're always going to be successful. But the first step out of this box is to say, you know what? We're going to go get them, and they're going to come here, and we're going to show them why they're going to be here. We've got a chunk of real estate that's sitting, that's been listed to be sold, developmental. They've got, done our toxic studies and all that. And they've got lots of real estate here that could be developed. It wouldn't change the rural character of the community. You'll take a field of 10 or 20 acres full of weeds and turn it into a increase to the grand list, possibly increase jobs. But we sort of have to, we know what we've got. Let's go get the ones that we need. And I'm not saying it's easy, not by any means. You've got a real strong, I think we've got a really great resource in Tyra, but she can't do it alone. She's got 100 other things to do. Amy can't do it alone because she's got her hands full of all the other things. People call her for all sorts of stuff. So you've got the EDC that, in my view, needs to be, we have to know what we want and we have to go after it. Yeah. And I think that's how it goes. And that's what all this says. I'm just trying to, and so a lot of my comments are more rhetorical, but it's like, okay, what are we going to do with this? So anyway, I didn't want to take the mic too long, but to answer your question, Brian, I agree. We're on the right, I think we're all saying the same things. The thing is, we just need to sort of, I think, more align, get ourselves all on the same page, right? And say, and that's what this is to your question, how are we going to take all this stuff? Well, let's tell them how we're going to do it and then reinforce it as we go.
Yeah. I'm just hoping that's
so
part of the
just as a sidebar, guys, I do want to point out, because I know George probably doesn't know this, we actually just had a marketing plan developed for us on contract by EDC that is almost ready to roll out. And that's more of a municipal branding marketing plan, but it certainly has those tie-ins. I would add on with George there, I think at our next EDC meeting, in addition to whatever we construct, and the members of EDC and I can pass stuff back and forth, I think it would be a good thing for you guys to articulate your roles, what you want to do and how you want to do it. Because I will tell you that in the couple of years that I've been involved, you guys have escalated your activity. And I think that you can define how you want to further escalate it, in terms based on what we've been discussing. But it's all been very organic thus far, right? We've been following directions as they've presented themselves to us. But George brings a good point up, which is that if we can put that into a series of, hey, we're going to work on this from month 1 to month 5, we're going to work on this from year 1 to year 10, then that'll give some structure that I think will be helpful to everybody.
If I could add to your comments, Tyra, I would say that what is important in the management leadership in this type of thing, in my opinion, is we've got activity measures and we've got results measures, right? I think all you managers know that. And we need to hold the EDC accountable. Here's your activities and here's your results. And you've got to produce results. And if not, then what are we doing? What's the point? Is it we're going through an exercise? So You got to have measurable, attainable, measurable goals. That goes for all of us, right? That's what we do in life. So we're going to say, here's my goal. This is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. We may not get it all, but if you come up at 80%, you're probably doing pretty good. Thank you.
Yeah, so Brian Yacino, I would certainly invite you as the chair to put your thoughts on direction into a draft form that we can start to feather in and come back and work on this through the next couple of months while we're putting this guidance document together, right? This guidance document is a 10-year document. We're only going to give the topic one general working group dedicated night, but in our meetings month to month, we have opportunities to construct that, to say exactly what you see the role as, what everybody feels they're capable of taking an individual role to do. And I think that would be extremely beneficial for you guys and give all of us a sense of accomplishment, because you know, the setting of the goals is how you measure the successes.
Yeah, I'm taking notes. A lot of this is stuff that we have talked about over the years, and somebody might say, yeah, haven't followed through with it. But yeah, I'm taking notes. We'll try to lay out something, and George is right. Having goals, when we do that, it works. Having measurable.
Yeah, and I would agree. Every time we have set even the small goals, even like those low-hanging fruit goals, we have said, this is the project, here's the beginning point, here's the end point, here's how we're going to get to it. So, you know, it becomes the point at which you start to describe the larger ones. We've started that with that business incubator, right? That's a long-term development goal for a specific purpose, but that's only a piece. It's a piece in a larger revitalization puzzle. But again, certainly satisfies some goals of EDC, but what are the other goals, right? Let's articulate them, and let's come up with a 10-year calendar.
Sounds good.
I like that. George, you've been so helpful. You're on mute, George.
Well, don't worry. I'll mess up here along the way. Don't worry. Anyway, you got my unvarnished opinions here, so I don't usually give those out.
We have no varnish as a group.
Okay, good.
My varnish wore off years ago.
You're lucky. It's hard to get rid of that stuff.
All right, I'm scrolling down here to the community priorities that George bullet pointed for me. What do you guys got for me? I mean, the list of economic development initiatives, that's easy. I have that, I can do it. It was already a plan to feather it into the document, so we can certainly discuss them here. We started to discuss some of them, but that is a thing that can and will get added in. So let's just say that. Circling that in my marginal notes. What else you guys got?
An awful lot here that we've just been introduced to, so I need to digest some of this. And should we review it again before? Are we having another meeting on this?
Not with this working group, but I think we've just established that the EDC, we should add this, Brian, as as an agenda item for the next couple of months to continue to work on this based on these outlines, which is appropriate in every way. And again, we'll make it better. But initial thoughts here, if I get initial thoughts coming out of this, then when I create a first draft, because that's been, I think, helpful for everybody to just have something to tear apart and edit. That's the only reason I'm doing all this writing, guys.
Yeah, and I'm just too. I'm reading and rereading.
I don't have a problem with anything that's written here. Again, I feel like it's a great outline. developing commercial property increased by 10%, assist, make 5 new employers. I mean, it all comes down to how are we marketing and going to attract those people to come do this so we can get to these goals, right? And maybe I'm weighing too heavily on the marketing plan, but I don't know how else to do it.
No,
Well, marketing is a modern concept, right? But it is effective. I mean, I am scrambling in the background like mad with this ERTD thing to do these regional initiatives, and I've just about got one of these nuts cracked. But they are multi-piece, and the results of marketing are not immediate.
Of course not.
For sure.
Yeah, I mean, neither is this. I say it's George has outlined a 10-year plan. I mean, obviously that's going to take some time, but well, let me rephrase and put it in a form of a question. Is there anything else that we should be doing that's outside of marketing? I mean, other than hiring people that just go, door to door and you go this type of stuff. I mean, I know that obviously sounds funny, but is there another means that I'm not thinking about?
Well, financial
we're
incentives,
not thinking about.
Financial incentives will probably help. Carrot, works better than the stick in a lot of cases. So, there are businesses out there, and there are business brokers, and there's certainly people that help with this stuff. Whether it's, I don't know about consultants, I don't know if it's that big, but there's some way of incentivizing businesses to come here, but we need to know who they are. So I think that's the start, right? We've got, what do we control? We can only control certain things: taxes, services, regulatory oversight. I think the challenge for any governmental body is especially in small towns, is that, we all serve, most of us serve as, many of us serve as volunteers. And, people come and go, and we have elections, and, we have elected officials, and, they may be perfectly suited for the challenge, but they move on. And then someone else comes, another administration comes in and it changes. So that's the challenge, I think, with this. But you're right. I think we need to incentivize people to do it. And if it's check the box and I did it and nothing happens, then that's a challenge. That's not going to work. Do we find third parties to come in and, give them a financial incentive to do it? I don't know, maybe. Is there a way to do that? Possibly. I've not been a specialist in promoting businesses to come to a town. I do other things, but the fundamental issues there, and I look at the news. All right, you can see that the governor of whatever state's now going to to China, going wherever to attract businesses to the country, or to Europe, or these political representatives are touting their states. And I keep wondering if there is a forum somewhere, or a venue, or a conference, or something, whether it's virtual or in person, where they all go to cut deals. Companies want to go places where they can flourish. They want to. The companies, as we all know, his mission is to make a net profit. If you're a stock private company, you do it for yourself. If you're doing it public, you're doing it for your stockholders. And if they're not, then they fall into the category of not for profit. And then their job is to minimize expense so they can optimize and maximize the services they provide to others. And they're in the same business. They just, it's a different business plan. So I think that we just need to find out where those people are. Maybe we need to do some more research on that. Where do these cities go to attract businesses? Is there a business development?
EDC guys, EDC guys, and Joanne, as a Mizrac person here, you will recall that we have for a couple of years talked about trying to develop and endorse a program of incentives based on perceived value for companies coming in, right? We've been talking about this ever since Kai Zor came up with her biodigester project.
Right.
And the disappointing results that she got in trying to get some relief from the town. So we have been talking about that now, again, for over a year. So I would say, Brian Ucino, let us once again add that to that agenda, and we will articulate that in here. Joey Martino actually sent me some information about how his company negotiates these things and the kinds of breaks they've gotten from certain, in some cases, other countries, other states. I think he does not want to pony up the Connecticut information because it might be sensitive in terms of setting up competitors, which I understand. So I think that EDC, MISRAC, branding as the three committees that are closest to those issues should work on that plan, and that can be an action item within this recommending, guidance document, but something that we can start working on right away. I can see you're taking notes, Brian Yacino. I love that.
I am.
I know you are.
Can I ask a question? Does obviously we can work on this with our various groups, but if we make a call to NECOG and ask for them for a specialist to help us, put this out to the public, is that something that they could guide us with, or at least recommend some names, or do we not know that answer to that question?
I think theoretically they can. It's going to end up being Phil Chack or Hoween.
Yeah, I know it.
I know that's the issue, isn't it?
Maybe turn the tables on.
Yes,
ask them the question.
Theoretically, that is a service that NECOG can at least assist with, I believe. That was part of what the branding study was.
Yeah, at least say, oh yeah, you recommend this company. I don't know if they can do that either, but I don't know if they can.
Well, Tyra, couldn't you just go to NECOG and say, how many companies are looking to relocate to Northeast Connecticut, and what are they looking for? Can they answer that? That's a fundamental, basic question, right? Could they answer that question?
I think there are other organizations that are better positioned for that. DECD, CEDAS, CERC, and all their acronyms are acronyms. But those are the three that pop to the top of my head that are more directly related to economic development.
Do we pay money to participate in these? Do we pay money for these things, or are we just all collective members of these three organizations?
Well, DECD is a state agency,
right?
So
okay.
Everybody is sort of a member.
Right.
We are a member of the enterprise zone. We have an enterprise zone. I'll be honest, I think it's a terrible program, but it does exist, and it is theoretically an incentive program. And there are others out there. Main Street Connecticut is a big fan of something called tax incentive financing,
right,
which every time they describe it to me, the second that they're describing it to me, I think, oh, this is feasible. And then the second I go and I read it over myself, I go, this is terrible. It's borrowing against an unknown future. But there are definitely towns that have used it effectively. Windsor Locks comes to mind. They are big cheerleaders for TIF.
Do we pay for any of this stuff though? It's all like you're a member if you're a town and that's it. We don't have to pay. We don't pay NECOG. We don't contribute to their budget or anything.
Amy can answer that question better than I can. I believe that we have dues to NECOG, but I don't think that they are optional.
I guess
I thought we did contribute something. It was in the town budget before.
If you pay nothing, then maybe we're getting what we pay for.
Or
my concern.
You're speaking about NECOG?
Or any of these groups.
Yeah, in this case, yes, Amy.
As far as I understand, we can't opt out, but possibly we could if we weren't satisfied with the services.
No, I don't think anybody's actually suggesting opting out. It's just wondering whether we have services that we are paying for, or if they are just something that we are owed because we're part of the region. I think that's the question.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Are we getting our money's worth? Right, is what I'm saying. If we're part of all this stuff, we put all this energy into it. We're not getting anything out of it. Then maybe we should do something different. That's all. I haven't been involved with all these groups before, but that's how I would look at it. It says, okay, we're part of this. We've been part of it for X number of years. What has it done? If it's done a lot, great. If it's a voluntary thing and they do what they feel like, well, are we in the top 3 list, or we're only there if we push them? And as with all those
yeah,
things,
so most of these.
Go ahead.
Most of these agencies are state agencies, or at least quasi-public, and membership is sort of just because you're in the state of Connecticut. DECD is definitely that way. I think CETUS is the same, and CERC for that matter. So if you want my frank opinion on DECD, I think they do some things really, really, really well. I think their brownfields division is super well managed. I think they have a purpose that they articulate well and they follow through. They do granting, they do follow-up, they do outreach. The enterprise zone thing, which is supposed to be this incentive program, is utterly shambolic. It's difficult for businesses to understand and navigate. It's managed poorly. They have a lot of meetings that, to me, I've attended a ton of them, do not have a ton of substance. They're very nice people, but I just think it's terrible. I think that some of the incentive programs that exist by statute, and Ken Slater helped Amy put together that rehabilitation area that we mapped the downtown Mill District to. That is well articulated within the statutes. It's been adopted. The question is, how do you get, and this goes back to the marketing thing, how do you get that information out to developers? Now, in that case, it's developers of housing. So although housing is an economic development issue, it's not the kind of economic development issue we're talking about right now. But those ones are really, really well articulated.
Yeah.
So it's just, you know, it's swinging at pitches.
Well, I think the undercurrent, in my view of looking at this, is that we have to decide what we're going to do. We're going to have to do it. And if they can help us, great. But don't wait. Let's not wait around for them for whatever triple, acronym or government agency to do something. If we can use them, great, because they're there to be used. We pay our taxes individually, collectively, and we need to get our money's worth. And if it fails, it's our fault. It's not someone else's fault. And we have to take ownership of that and make it work. And it's not easy, and we're not going to be successful in everything. But I look over these things, and I look at where the town has been for the last 20 years, and I think we've had some successes. And there's external things that are beyond our control that we can always, use that to soften the blow. But reality is, if we can get this mill project launched, that'd be a real plus. And it would also, send a ton of positive energy into the universe. And it could be a hook for a lot of other sales pitches. But we have the fundamentals of, do we know the 5 things that we want to do? And does everyone in town know what those things are? How are we communicating that? And how are we selling it? And whose role? It's all everyone's responsibility, but who's the primary record keeper? And where are the measurables? Where are the activities, and do we have measurable results? And how do we measure those results? And it's those fundamental things: plan, organize, direct, lead, control. Put our product. Where are we selling our product? What is our product? Do we even know what it is? Those kinds of fundamental things. I look at this and I go, if we can pull it together, we've got a lot of resources here. We won't necessarily, and I don't think we would destroy the character of the town is what it is. And I think ultimately we could, improve it. And we've made those steps, and you've pointed them out by the zoning issues, the regulatory oversight, and we're improving that. And it's a process. It's not going to happen overnight. And I think this is supposed to be a 10-year plan, right? So, hopefully in the next decade, when I'm 10 years wiser, we will be there. But I think it's real. I think on the sunset of this COVID situation, there is a major shift, and that's an opportunity. External fact, every situation that's bad has got a huge opportunity. When things would just stay the same, that's terrible, because guess what? Nothing changes, and we want change. So how do we do it? And if we're looking for it, we're seeking it, we'll find it. The first step, of course, is recognizing it, then coming up with a plan, implementing that plan, tracking the results, and modifying it as needed. Those are fundamental things. You've all heard this stuff before, but sometimes you have to say it. And my comments here, back and forth to Tyra, were just, hey, this is what I think. What do you guys, what do you folks think, ladies and gentlemen? And, for what it's worth. And you need to frame it and condense it. But when people read this stuff, they don't have time to read 50 pages. They have time to read 3 or 4. If they're really interested, they may look at the other sections. So we need to catch their attention early and get that hook out there, because if we don't have the hook in the first sentence, we're gone. You know?
I love it, George. A good rhetorical challenge makes the rest of the document stronger.
Yeah.
So,
So
there are no complaints about these questions. Some of them have direct answers, some of them don't.
yeah.
We may have differing approaches, but even in the discussion of them, it makes the articulation of them better. And this document is to articulate, right? It is to articulate priorities, needs, and plans.
We have a huge resource here in the town of Thompson, and I've seen this personally firsthand. Tremendous resources. People don't realize what their capabilities are until they're challenged, and they oftentimes rise to the occasion, and they surprise themselves, because within them they have that capacity, and we as a town have this capacity. So I put it out there. Let's make it happen. Let's make it go forward, and let's put this thing behind us. But more importantly, let's not bury it, or let's not put it aside. But it has to be reminded. We have to come up at every single meeting. Everyone has to know what those goals and objectives are for the town, whether it's the Inland Wetlands Commission, whether it's the Planning and Zoning Commission, whether it's go on down the list of commissions we have, which have got a dozen or more. Everyone should probably start out saying, remember, these are the goals of the town. This is what we're trying to achieve, and this is how you can help get there. And if we can try to do that, every one of us does it, then we will advance, because it'll be part of our DNA. It'll be part of what we do. But there's a lot of work. The first thing is, where do we hunt those deer? I mean, I want to get them in here, so let's make sure they show up. Thank you. But we can do it.
All right, let's move down the topic, and we've talked about it a little bit, but we're just going to go through this document because, or George's response document to me, because it is valuable. Just in terms of your first question here, what can the town of Thompson do that the USDA isn't or can't already do? And I will say that there are several answers there. USDA is focused on large producers, right? We are not a large producer community, nor would we actually want to be. They are environmentally unsustainable. They create fragile food system chains. One of the things that in all of the various focus groups that have come up, that any of them that have involved the public, when you say, what is it you want to see here? Do you know what one of the first things is that comes up every time? Why don't we have a grocery store? A grocery store,
It's a Putnam.
right? So we have a broken food system. We have 2 convenience stores and a Dunkin' Donuts. I'm sorry, 3 convenience stores, because there's the 2 across from the street from each other on 12, and then the Dollar General and a Dunkin' Donuts. That's our food security here in Thompson. So, and we alluded to it at the beginning of this section, right? If you've got to drive and you're not cost burdened, it's just a minor inconvenience. And from the point of view of the economics of the town, you're just giving your money to Webster, you're giving your money for Putnam, but you individually don't care. But if you are cost burdened and you have to plan trips or plan budgeting for gas or things like that, not having a grocery store is degrading to your ability to further yourself, right? It's just one more thing. It is expensive to be poor. It is expensive to be cost burdened, because all of those things add levels. So when we hatched, for example, the food system incubator concept, that was one of the things that prompted that. Food co-ops, farmers markets, and there's a model for this. Just to our north in Worcester, there is a fantastic not-for-profit called the Regional Environmental Council. They actually used to have a really wide-ranging set of mandates, like they did lead abatement in urban apartments and stuff, and then they also did this food security thing. The food security thing has become their main focus. So they started small. They started with encouraging urban gardens, both community gardens and actual small-scale urban farmers. And then they started to do these mobile markets, and they got it so that they would take SNAP benefits and all these things. Then they branched out to the Worcester Food Hub. Right? It's not directly an REC project, but they certainly were instrumental in bringing it to the forward. So they have classes that graduate every year who become food truck owners. They are small scale farmers, like the guys who do microgreens in repurposed shipping containers, aquaponics. Yes, hemp growers, actually pot growers in Massachusetts, because you can do that there. You can only grow hemp here. Again, we talked about brewers, wineries. So, you know, expanding your thought about what agriculture is and how it is a viable business is something that shortens the food chain and adds different kinds of security in a community. One is just basic food security, right? And that's for people across spectrums. It's appealing if you don't have to travel and you're cost burdened. It's appealing if you are, you know, a hipster professional who wants to go to the farmer's market. It's appealing if you are an elderly person in a walkable neighborhood who also has difficulty getting to a grocery store, whether or not you're cost burdened, right? There's all kinds of things that are a community benefit. Obviously, the businesses that arise out of it build individual wealth for the proprietors of those. Individual wealth bleeds out into the community in other ways. If I've got more money in my pocket, I can go to LB's for breakfast an extra day. And again, as the community becomes more vibrant, as these smaller enterprises take root, whether they're based out of the home or in small, now developable parcels or buildings that were not previously developable, you get to have a certain cohesion. Never proposing this is the be all and end all, right? But if you look at what makes, say, a Putnam attractive to people who drive through, it's because there are small businesses that are forward facing, that are appealing, and people go back and back and back, right? So this is a way to be Thompson, right? Because we lack the storefront inventory. We have to build that or adapt to what we have as an inventory of standing buildings, which is not great for conventional retail. But we have a lot of small parcels of land. We have a lot of people who could utilize their own land in productive ways. So when I say we need to have an emphasis on these systems, again, it's not the only emphasis. It's a branch of what we are capable of and what we are well positioned to do because of our wealth of open and available land. So that's what we can do that the USDA can't do. USDA can't put a food co-op in for us.
Good to know.
What else we got on this topic, guys? Don't leave me to be the only defender of farming as a viable choice.
Well, I don't want to.
Do they pay?
I don't want to rule it out. Anything, you know, like I said earlier, I want the businesses to present to us and us make a ruling on. There's many forms of agricultural. There's agricultural engineering. There's hydroponics. There's all kinds of different things, and all of this is above my head. I'm sure that there's things that I don't even know about that, or you know, don't necessarily mean cows or other things. It could be engineering, things of that nature going down that road. So I feel like it could be an agricultural town for sure.
Yeah, I do too. A lot of people appreciate, well, the open space use. We do get people from out of town coming to, you know, Blackmer Farms, which is close to Dudley, Southbridge, Webster. So, you know, I consider it part of our overall Thompson. You know how hard.
Yeah, and I'll go you one further on that. Look at what Kai's is doing up there at Fort Hill with that anaerobic biodigester.
I was just going to mention Fort Hill Farms.
Super innovative what she's doing up there. She is she's the first woman-owned biodigester facility, certainly in the state of Connecticut, I believe in New England. And that is taking both agricultural waste and food waste, diverting it, converting it to energy, and selling it back to the grid. So I consider that agriculture and engineering, right? So that when Brian says agricultural engineering, that's exactly what we say when we want to encourage agricultural startups. It's not just, I want a guy with 30 cows out there. It's, I want the next Kai's Orr. I want the next person who is looking at, look, we all have to eat. We all have to be clothed. We all need energy. And we can do it according to old models, which are deleterious, or we can posit new solutions. And those things can absolutely come out of engineering programs, out of the WPIs or the Yukon School of Engineering, which also has a fantastic agricultural and health services school.
Well, why not list your PV array farms as new opportunities? Because that's one of the fastest growing areas, and maybe we can find a better way to tax them. They're arbitraging the future for 20 and 30 years when they put these facilities in. They're taking arable land and turning it into a ground lease for decades. Biomass and so-called, we used to say biomass and trash to cash. For 5 years, I ran the energy division of AIG Lexington. So I've been to many biomass plants, and cogen is a term we use also, because you're taking one source and you're converting it from raw material into electricity. They're all great, but again, it's an economy of scale. It can't, on a micro standpoint, it's great, but are you going to have enough? You have to feed it. You need to make a substantial amount. And when you look at Fort Hill, how does that increase the grand list, which is our tax base, which gives us revenue?
Well, I'd have to ask that specific question of the assessor, but I'm pretty sure that equipment she's putting up there is taxable on the grand list. that is a massive, massive facility she's putting up there.
It's a great thing. We might as well put in turbines. Wind turbines can do a number of things, and the new engineering, the technology we have today can do a lot as well. So maybe we're attractive to them. I don't know what our wind current measures are, but those things are out there, right? So
yeah, we've looked into the wind thing before. I don't think it adds up, but yeah. If we had a waterfall over at the Thompson, some of our rivers there, and now they're all dried up, maybe we could do something like that. But
yeah,
the return,
a lot of challenges there. Yeah.
The return of hydro.
Yeah.
Which is actually not a terrible idea. The dams are already in place if they can ever get fixed, right? Then that becomes more feasible.
That's huge.
All right. Does anybody have any other thoughts on this? Because, I'll be frank, guys, I'm going to pursue this angle because we've talked about it, but I will only pursue this angle in as far as it is sensible according to the master plan, right?
No, I agree with that. I agree. I think agricultural engineering is huge, and that angle should be talked about. Absolutely.
All right. Scrolling down, and then we can probably wrap this up. So these two topics are actually the same to me, outdoor recreation and tourism assets. For those of you who are unaware, although I think everybody on this call probably is aware, we are going into the second year of a 2-year assistance agreement with the National Park Service, specifically to develop a trail town action plan for Thompson. And its origin point is the train wreck park, to develop it as a feature on the airline trail. We are tied into the 12-town task force. They're doing a tremendous amount of work to drive tourism through the whole length of the trail and into outdoor amenities in general. I'll tell you this about the state's view on tourism right now, because I am on the regional tourism board, is so COVID messed everything up for everybody, right? But one of the things that it didn't mess up at all was outdoor recreation, because what's the only thing everybody thinks is pretty safe? Going outside. So the entire state focus is going to be on emphasizing wide open spaces in the state of Connecticut, driving people to them, and developing assets around them. So I'm actually just about ready to submit a proposal to the district on behalf of the airline trail to put well, the Bryans know and Joanne knows this. It's a very specific print brochure, but it'll have a digital tie-in for the 7 towns on the 12-town trail that fall within the district, that'll drive website awareness both to the state site, to the regional site, to the individual town sites. But as we said earlier in the evening, the flip side of that is the trail itself doesn't generate a single dollar. It's the things surrounding the trail. So a thing that comes back frequently are what are the lodging options. We have a few more than we did just a couple years ago, but they're still small. The Mason House is going to be developed, as we know, although that's primarily going to be used as a wedding venue. Some of it will still be occasionally rentable. There are a couple of other B&Bs. But what are the other, it is definitely going to be more than just one marketing asset and this trail town plan. So, how do we want to flesh that out? Because it is one of the things that comes up as well in those SWOT analyses and in those community priority things. People value this openness. So if we value it, we should capitalize on it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I see the question, is this really an engine for economic development? I don't think there's a way to actually measure that. But I think the question is, how do we make it an economic development, right? And I know I've talked about, and I printed those, I'll call it pamphlets or flyers for the kiosks that I've completely failed to post on the kiosks. I was so gung-ho about it, and I failed to do it. But how do we use those kiosks to our benefit to actually, support local business? And are we allowed to? And I believe the answer is we are allowed to post what we
That's
what we want in those kiosks. But is there any other thing that we could do on those trails? Because you're exactly right. Every time I went down to the airline trails with my kids to ride bikes, there was multiple people down there, lots of people with their bikes. And if we don't post something on those kiosks, I don't know how people are getting information about the town. Now, I know some people are a little bit more savvy with the All Trails app, and there's other means of marketing things, but let's just keep it basic here and just post something on the damn kiosk for starters. So granted, I'm like kind of stabbing myself in the neck here because I'm the one that told people to do it. I'm the one that's failing to do it, but I think it's how do we make it more economic with these, the hiking trails, the airline trail, the conservatory lands, stuff like that. So that's
right. So what we know, and thanks to our buddy Charlie, because he keeps on top of it, is we know that there has been an increase in trail usership over the last year, specifically because of the boost that COVID gave it. It's ridiculous. It's like 8 times the use, according to the census counters, right? So, all right, we know we're not currently earning $1 on that, or not as many as we could. So we're going back to George's favorite word, there's your opportunity. We know there are more people already coming. So what we've got to do is drive them from the trails, not to Putnam, but to Thompson Speedway's restaurant, to Our Father's Table, to T-Rex. And we also have to encourage the kind of small tourism assets, right? And again, we're going back to things that are small, manageable, that have a low entry point for people seeking to start businesses. And that's the beauty of the Morning Beckons farm over there. It's not that everybody is dying to have their alpaca yarn, although I do buy alpaca yarn and fleeces and things like that, but I'm crafty. They are making a go of it as an agritourism destination. Fort Hill Farms has an aspect of that as well. Agritourism is something that has legs. And to, answer a question that's further down, is this really an engine for economic development? There are absolutely reports that you can pull that show the number of sort of collateral dollars that a well-developed trail town pulls in. People come, they want an ice cream, they want lunch, they want to stay and potter around. Right now, what they can do is they can get on the airline trail and they can go to Putnam and they can do all those things. They can do some of those things here, but we don't do a good job of driving them. So first job is to drive people to what you already have, and the second job is to develop things that you don't have yet, but you think you have potential to improve. Now, one of those is going to be that train wreck park. I mean, that's sort of a foregone, right? We're working on that actively. But when you're there, what's the appeal? So some of the smaller things that we're working on, again, like the little pop-up sheds, that's just a cute thing, not in and of itself going to bring in a ton of dollars, but certainly some to those micro entrepreneurs, certainly some directly to the town in terms of, however we set up that rental agreement to use them. And then the outlying, the surrounding restaurants and amenities. That's how you build a thing. Nobody ever came to a town because they had a big corporation to visit, right? Nobody ever was driving around one day and said, hey, let's go to Thompson. They've got really well-paved roads. But they may say, let's go to Thompson. They've got a really well-maintained trail with this interesting stuff on it. And while we're there, we'll go over to T-Rex afterwards and play some mini golf. Right? Those are the conversations you want people to have. And we have those conversations on the tourism district all the time. How do you increase somebody's stay? How do you capture them to do something that they didn't come here planning to do, but they decide they want to do later? Last Green Valley does a great job with that, with the Walktober, and most of those things are free. Actual Walktober events, I mean, some of them probably have a small fee, but they put a tremendous amount of effort into marketing those things, getting people to walk outside at night, and they are absolutely a tourism draw.
Yeah, I've always, in the past, I know Brian Yacino and Joanne, we've talked about this in the past, that I don't think we take advantage of Last Green Valley's group enough. I remember them coming up to meet with us. God, Brian, what was this, freaking 10 years ago, maybe? I don't know.
It's got to be 8 or 10 years ago. Michelle came over.
They came up, and I asked them straight up, if we put together a marketing thing, and would you guys be okay with releasing it to your, entire membership, just to get a, for your information, this is what Thompson has to offer. They were more than willing to do that. So I just feel like we should take advantage of them more often in mass publications and stuff like that. Maybe that cost should be.
They're fantastic partners. They are fantastic partners and very enthusiastic about promoting all of the area from Sturbridge all the way on down to the end of their run.
Sure.
In fact, they funded some of our projects. Go ahead, Joanne.
Can you send out a copy of George's comments to us so that we have a chance to review it? I've got to wrap this up.
No, that's fine. We're almost done here anyway. I think I did already send it, Joanne, but I'll send it again. Did you guys get copies of George's this afternoon? Did I not forward that? I thought I did.
I don't think so.
Didn't get it.
I don't recall seeing that, Tira.
My bad. I could have sworn that I did. All right, I will absolutely do that tomorrow morning first thing. Big note here on my first page. Send George's notes. Maybe I only sent it to myself to open up here, but I thought I sent it. Well, whatever. Yes, I think he's given us excellent thought prompts and writing prompts.
Do we have another then that we want to get together and review all this? Outside of EDC, so I can.
Well, I think it's going to be EDC the way it's going to work out as an agenda item.
Okay, no, will do.
But you can send me, as I'm working on this, whatever commentary. I just want to take a look at the schedule that I have here. Oh, so next week is the section on transportation. Nobody on this call is on that. That's just me, Jeff Bolte, and Dennis Blanchette, so I'm going to work on that with them.
I think our next
yes,
meeting is October as a group.
What did you say, Joe?
October 19th is our next full group meeting. So that's a long time from now. It's a month from now.
Yes, you are correct. Yeah, for the full group, but there's, every week there's a subgroup.
That's right. Okay.
Right. So next week is the transportation section to start that work. But I'll keep doing it exactly as I'm doing. We'll have the weekly meetings. I'll update the draft based on comments received and whatever we can edit in, but it's still a fluid document. It's a fluid document until the end, right? And when it has to be finally adopted. Still on an accelerated schedule because there are no options. This has to be in place by the end of the calendar year, but it's totally achievable. We're making great progress. But anyway, so after I can make the edits this week, I will send out the full amended draft, and if I can get to next week's section, I will send that as a separate excerpt. Otherwise, that'll come early next week. Anybody got anything else before we let poor Joanne go?
Yeah, I'm gonna leave the meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Bye, Joe.
Take care.
Hi, Joe.
Night. Thank you.
So, you've got those notes for next EDC agendas.
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
Joe,
we'll get some.
Joe Perotti, are you still on?
I sure am.
So what do you want to do with it? I mean, I've proposed bringing the draft each month into P&Z as well, since it's ultimately your statutory responsibility. How do you want to attack this on Monday?
Yeah, I think just sort of, I think showing them the work that this larger group has done already. Yeah.
You're tired, I can see.
What's that?
You're tired, I can see.
Yeah, do you want to like set up a phone conversation tomorrow or Friday and we can talk it through?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
I'm all for it. You text
What's
me when you
zoning
have time
is it?
between classes.
With zoning, it's just kind of like an FYI, this is where we're at. Are you looking for feedback from zoning on Monday just to kind of jump in here? Or is it just?
Not necessarily on Monday, because this is the first time they're going to see, well, except for Joe and you and
Yeah.
Charlene,
Yeah.
Who are the three members of zoning who've been at all involved. But, clarifying to them that since it's their ultimate responsibility, they should take that back for their own commentary that they want to include. Because like I said, this is a fluid document until it's no longer a fluid document.
Right.
Right. It's editable up till the last second.
Yeah.
And in a very different sort of burden of acceptance than the zoning regulations were, which had, statutory requirements in terms of the nature of the adoption. This is different than that. The threshold's lower, but still requires, it's still the responsibility of P&Z in the end.
Yeah, so will there have to be a motion in December to accept this and then move it forward? I just want to make sure it's clear to them on Monday, I guess, that's the ultimate.
I believe that is the case, but I will come into the meeting with a full ability to describe to them what the nature of their responsibility is.
Yeah, that would be important.
I mean, if you look at the old one, the only people credited with working on it are the Planning and Zoning Commission. I've asked Randy and Bob Wurge and John Rice, who were on the commission at the time, and they essentially said Kevin Kennedy wrote the whole thing, and
Kevin Kennedy did it. Yeah, that's right.
yeah, sort of commented on it here and there. And you can tell that that was written off the cuff.
Well, there's a lot to write. There's a lot to write, and probably he was solo, and I don't know how much involvement did they have? Did everyone have? I didn't know.
Yeah,
him
well, I think a lot of communities write them as just to meet the statutory requirement, and then they become paperweights. I don't want this to be a paperweight, right? If we're putting this work into it, and we just put in the work to overhaul the whole freaking zoning code, and we're going to go in and we're going to overhaul the whole subdivision code in 2021, these documents should inform each other. They should have genuine meaning. And, if you get questions as commissioners or board members or elected officials or whatever, or staff members or whatever, you should be able to say, we're doing this because it relates to priorities that we've identified, and this is our plan, right? That makes everything better for everyone. Having a plan is a good thing. And there was not really there were plans proposed in that document, but I don't think a single person could name what any of them were.
That's accurate.
My point exactly.
Yeah.
Let's make them short.
All right,
more
guys.
than 5, no, we can't remember. My memory, I just don't have the capacity to remember more than 5 things. So just do it for me.
Do you know that Benedictine monks could memorize entire texts by means of a series of images strung together in a pre-literate world? There's an art of memory that you can. Yeah, well, there's an art of memory you can teach yourself that's associative, which is really fascinating. But that's neither here nor there. 9 o'clock, I'm calling it, and I'll send you guys my updated copy as soon as I have it available for you.
Always a pleasure. Have a nice night. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good
Thanks,
night.
everyone.
You too,
Bye.
my friends. Good night.
Night.